Welcome. We're doing this event. The library and student services is hosting for Constitution Day, in honor of Constitution Day, which was last Saturday. I'm sure everyone in this Zoom has heard the term constitutional crisis and headlines such as democracy on the brink. So that is what we're here to talk about today. And we're very, very lucky to have our Vice President for Academic Affairs, a renowned legal scholar, to discuss with us and to open the discussion and to lead it. So I leave you with our Vice President, Humphrey Crookendale.
Thank you so much, Natalia. And good afternoon to all of you that are on this call. I would echo that part of Natalia's opening remarks that says that she's looking forward to a discussion. So with that said, I do not plan to dominate this hours-long event. What I would like to do is to start with a couple of opening remarks and observations. Hopefully, that will provide a framework for which we can begin, and I want to underscore the word begin, what I envision as a continuing healthy debate on this topic and a number of other relevant topics that are now currently in the news. Having said that, specifically to this whole debate around democracy and acceptance of election results, I am, I would say, fair description, a child of immigrants. And I came to New York City in 1971. You can count my age from that, I don't mind. And I was just about 15 years old, but I was thoroughly fascinated by what then was transpiring another potential constitutional crisis in the United States of America. And that constitutional crisis surrounded events relevant to the break-in of the Democratic National Headquarters in a hotel called Watergate. And it became a near constitutional crisis because as many of you will recall, as a result of a confluence of events, starting with some intrepid reporters at the Washington Post and Senate hearings, the President of the United States was forced to resign the office of the presidency of the United States of America. And his elected vice president, a man called Spiro Agnew, he had been forced, even before the Watergate crisis, he had been forced to resign his office because of some criminal behavior that he had engaged in while he was the governor of the state of Maryland. And so when Mr. Nixon, having no vice president, invited Gerald Ford to become vice president of the United States of America, it was that culmination that caused the nation to experience some constitutional tremors, because there was an absence of a vice president, of which Gerald Ford would become, and ultimately he would become the president. But I deliberately started there because As far back as then, there was a very close presidential election before the landslide election in which Mr. Nixon won, and there was lots of quiet conversations about whether or not that election was fair when Mr. Nixon had his first presidential campaign. But so I use that as a benchmarker to say that in the Kennedy-Nixon election, and that is as far back as my first relationship in American foray of politics began. Even back then when there were controversial elections, the one thing that struck me was that the losing candidate, and I took this for granted, and I now no longer take it for granted, the losing candidate, I used to think it was a matter of gentlemanship or gentlewomanship, would concede the election. I would now suggest to my colleagues that that concession is essential in a democracy. It is essential for maintaining the integrity and the stability of a democracy. If we cannot be assured of this most basic requirement, that there is a concession, it then brings into question whether or not any subsequent election can be viewed by all Americans, whether you are on the winning side or on the losing side. I would suggest it would bring into question whether or not we can trust any election thereafter. And so this small practice, if I should call it a small practice, of the concession after an election is critically important for ensuring that the continuity of a democracy is maintained. I would stop there to then also make this observation. A former president, and this is not, I hope this is not going to be a discussion about where Republican politics is and where Democratic politics is, but just the whole notion about the integrity of an election process. But there was a former president, President Carter, long after he was beaten soundly in his re-election bid, a massive landslide. He has continued to be active even into his 90s. And one of the things that struck me is that very often the United States would ask him to become a representative of the United States of America and to go and observe elections in countries that have far less of a tradition of passing elections from one administration to another in a seamless way. And so it just struck me how ironic it is that we now have, and even though I said I don't want this to evolve or devolve into a discussion about Republicans and Democrats, the New York Times about a week ago ran a story that said that of the 60-odd Republicans running for major offices in states, more than half of them have signaled that if they were not the winners, they would not concede nor acknowledge defeat. And so I joined that with President Carter being an observer in other countries, and to say, during the Reagan administration, Peggy Noonan wrote this wonderful speech for him that talks about a city on a shining hill. If we cannot agree to this most basic requirement that you must accept defeat, we cannot be a city on a shining hill. That is how important this requirement is. And so I would stop there and invite now my colleagues and my friends to weigh in on, are we still a city on a shining hill where others can look to as a model for how democracies can exist? I would posit to you in closing, we cannot exist as a democracy if no matter how sore you feel about losing, that you don't recognize it and concede. That is the first step, I would argue. Forget the Constitution. If you don't concede, you don't have a viable you don't have a viable democracy. I would stop there, Natalia, and turn it back to you to invite questions, conversations. But this is. I hope this is a way to provoke you into a provocative discussion.
Thank you so much, Vice President Crookendale. Any comments so far? Any questions?
I'll start the conversation. I think for what Dean Crookendale just stated, if we continue down the path that we are right now, we are in constitutional crisis. I think off of what he's asking, we can look upon it as far as we have a loss of statesmanship. I can remember, again, when off of the particular areas that the Dean was talking about and the particular elections, there was always a sense, and maybe it's a little naivety on my part because I was younger and the way I looked at things, but these people acted as statespeople, that there was country over party, and that we were all to look and understand that we have differences of opinion of economics and how social growth were to occur, how quickly things were to occur. But it was a discussion, a constant discussion. And it was no different than, do you choose to buy a red car or a blue car? That's just differences of opinion, but you can have the conversation. But statesmanship seems to be lost now. Now it's a win all, lose all type of atmosphere where I have to defend my position, and we don't look upon what we do in Congress or in the executive branch as for the people, but more as how do I keep my job? And that, as the that movie Dave said, this is a temp job. All these politicians are temporary people who are there on a mission from a position of how do I help the people which I represent from my particular district or county or whatever the breakdown is. And we've lost that sense of I have a calling to help people, just like a doctor does or an attorney does, and that's gone. So I think statesmanship is gone. We have a breakdown of our basic morals and ethics of a country, and this is where we're heading right now.
I want to join with my colleague Mark Wall. I'm not very good at this stuff, Natalia, but I clicked on the participant list to notice that the participants on this are distinguished lawyers, so I need to be mindful about that. But I would nonetheless join even with this lawyer, Mark Esquire, and acknowledge that I would embrace everything that he has said and just say it slightly different, that regardless of how you vote and what policies you embrace, like or don't like, when you become president of the United States, you don't become president of the blue states of America or the red states of America. You become president of the United States of America, and that I would say, Mark, is your my reinterpretation of your definition of statesmanship. And in the absence of that, we have a profound problem. But I want to hear from other colleagues that are on the call as to their thoughts on this.
I just want to add one point to what you just said. I think we saw some of that after 9/11, when regardless of the politics and regardless of the information that came to us and what we accepted governmentally, but the nation all came behind President Bush, and we were a people, regardless of your affiliation from whatever way you want to break it down. And you know, that might have been the last time when we had so many of us just look at each other, regardless of whatever your beliefs are and your background, and just say, you're an American. And, you know, this is what we are.
I agree. So I know for a fact that I see lawyers on this call, and I have been told that if you give a lawyer a podium, he or she is not going to be hesitant to take it and to speak into it. So I want to hear from them.
All right, I'm gonna start speaking then. Yes.
Brother Odom.
Yes, I agree with what everyone has said thus far. But I go on another path when I look at, you know, yesterday I was with somebody who made the post that you said with the United States of America. President Barack Obama was here on the Brooklyn Navy Yard yesterday. You know, inspirational as usual, and thinking about the Constitution. And he also was a constitutional president. But when you go back in history and you look at how our Constitution was formed, you know, if you watch the series, John Adams, you'll see all the fighting and the back and forth. And we would have hoped that by this time, we would be able to do it in a more civil manner. But it seems like it's going back to before of what happened. And when we look at the Constitution, we look at the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. It's called the Bill of Rights. And we look at freedom of speech, freedom of press. And what we have to look at is that we allow people to express their opinions. And though we may not agree with them, our Constitution does allow people to express their opinions. And though we see some of them get carried away with it, but even in expressing your opinion, the United States Constitution say, even with freedom of speech, there are still restrictions, time, place, and manner restrictions on where you can conduct speeches. So, you know, that's one of the key things, you know, in law school, you learn about the exceptions to the rule or the exceptions to the law, you know, because you could do things, but just like homicide, if you have a defense, you know, self-defense, you can alleviate certain things. So when we look at this, you know, the top part is, you would feel that, you know, people would learn how to play in the sandbox together. But apparently they can't play in the sandbox together anymore. And I think it's the United States Constitution, though, even though we have this crisis, because, you know, we go back to the Bill of Rights, but I think it's the Constitution that is still holding us together. Despite all of the stuff that's going on, I think the Constitution is still holding us together and giving us that foundation that we are, like in the beginning, once again, fighting for certain things that are in the Constitution to make sure that these things are going to be upheld. Because it shouldn't be the left or the right, it shouldn't be a red or blue like state, it should be the United States of America. But you can still travel to this day and go to some of those states and see that for some reason their Civil War or before the Civil War, their actions. And I can give you an example of that. When I was in law school, I interned at the Center for Constitutional Rights in Mississippi. And now, mind you, this is my last year, 1995, I'm in Mississippi. So I figured, all the stuff you read about in the books or whatever. But we made the newspaper because from 1988 to 1993, they found 47 Black males hung in their prison cells in Mississippi. The United States Constitution states in 1865, when we abolished slavery, and I always pose the question to people, what year did Mississippi pass the 13th Amendment in their state constitution? And I'll save you the trouble of Googling, but you could Google it, and it was in 2013. So it was passed in the United States Constitution in 1865. Mississippi passed it in their state constitution in 2013. That's a long time from 1865 to 2013. A lot of people don't realize 2013, Mississippi decided to pass it in their state constitution, the 13th Amendment, to abolish slavery. They said it was an oversight, there was a problem, there was some issues, but it took 2013. So it shows you that there is some division, or a lot of division at times, and people are fighting for what they think is right? But unfortunately, one of the things when it comes to voting, before they had the marble test, guess how many marbles were in there in order to allow you to vote. But just think of it this way, I always tell people, I could read 1,000 books. You could read 0 books. Our vote counts exactly the same. So if I could rile people up and just say, I'm gonna give you a job, and that's enough to get them to vote, and they never read a book before in their life, and they vote for me, that's it. And that's, when you're looking at the balance, like we're sitting here now among, people from all different backgrounds, but everybody on this Zoom call is educated, has some form of education. It's a pyramid. The majority of the people down at the bottom don't have one. So what happens is, if you deliver your message down there, like he did, and he said votes or whatever, or jobs, and they vote, then that's it, and we go by the majority, right? And we know we have the electoral process, and there's arguments and debates about whether we should have the electoral college or whether it should just be the popular vote. But when you sit down and talk, even when you speak among the academics, there are people, and I don't like to divide right and left, but there are people just as strong of their opinions on the right as it is on the left. And you look down and they have, and the tough part is when you see valid arguments, it's just like how people talk about 2 late great justices who were good friends, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia. 2 opposite poles, but they were still friends and able to meet, but strong on their viewpoints and how they interpreted the United States Constitution. I remember one time there was a debate and Scalia was on the panel and he said, everybody's arguing about certain things. I want my due process, when it came to eminent domain. But what he said, listen to this. He said, let me make it clear for you. Due process only means I have to give you a notice and a hearing. After I give you a notice and a hearing, I can still take your property. So all it is, that's what due process is, that you require a notice and a hearing, but still at the end, I can still take your property. So it's not like because you have this process that it's a guarantee that you're going to get what you want, right? It's just a guarantee that you're going to get a notice and a hearing, but then after that, the vote still may not be in your best interest. So the key is going to be, as we look from state to state and we look at the Constitution, we could compare states, Florida, Texas, New York. The people, it says we the people, and we the people there, that's how they vote. And it's ironic. Here's what you can catch me on any day, and this is what I carry in my pocket, and my students all know it. See what that is? It's the US Constitution. I keep one in my pocket just a habit. I've been keeping this in my pocket for over 20-something years. I carry the US Constitution.
So I don't want to appear to be, and I would welcome your reaction to this, Attorney Odom. I don't want, maybe I'm Pollyannish, but I take specific note of your And thank you so much for those powerful words that you have offered to this conversation, of this friendship between Scalia on the right, I don't know, Justice Beta Ginsburg on the left, and yet friends. Maybe this is Pollyanna, but my position is, in the absence of a healthy democracy, the opportunity to be able to crystallize one's views on the right and one's views on the left are null and void. And so a democracy affords us the opportunity to be able to entertain, no matter how abrasive it might be to your position. We nonetheless want that, and that is completely different from the view that there is only one view, and it is my view. And anything other than that is illegitimate, is deeply problematic to a democracy. So
Absolutely. Absolutely, 1000%. Anything to that challenges the democracy, and then it is a problem, and it's an issue that we must deal with. And what we know from this, by just telling them that you're bad, you don't like that, it's not enough. It's not going to work, because they still going to fight. And as all of you who went to law school know, that there's always two sides to an argument, right? Every time you go in a courtroom, there's somebody for the defense and there's somebody for the prosecution on the other side. So, and they're going to be arguing as zealously and vigorously as they can for their client when it comes there. So, yes, we feel that it's a constitutional crisis. Yes, we feel that people are taking it too far, and that we're supposed to be the example to the free world and to the world on how a democracy should work. And we are entitled to that opinion. And I agree that we should. Nevertheless, the same way how we feel, there's people on the other side that feel the same way, right? And so this is why we're having the issues. But I agree that there is a constitutional crisis. I agree that they shouldn't pack up their bags and run away and say, I'm upset, whatever like this. And we have to be as zealous and as vigorous as they are with our viewpoints, and saying that this is the Constitution, just like how John Adams was. What it stands for. We will not tolerate this. We have to go to the courts, and go to the courts. We're going to go to courts, because we're not going to stand up there and say, let's go with the ones who want to shoot and let's shoot it out. We're not going to do that. Sure. We're going to go to the courts, and we're going to have to keep on fighting for what we believe in. And we realize that there's issues with that, but we have to continue to fight, because as you see all the court cases now, with all the constitutional crisis, it's all over. This court overturns it. This court, the district court that was a Trump appointee, ruled that everything was okay. Then the appellate court came in and said, no, that was wrong, right? So, and remember, even with the Supreme Court, remember who's on the Supreme Court. And all it takes is a majority. So we can have
all it takes is 5.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And so we can say
let's hear what some other colleagues on this call has to say to weigh in on this really important subject.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is in regards to, do we believe that we're going to go to civil war based on what the current situation now and what it will be in the future? Because a lot of people believe in a lie that is not really true, but they believe in it so sincerely. And the pandemic box has been open. The Pandora's box has been open, and we can't close it. And people don't want to deal with it. They want to deal with it violently, because everyone responds now violently to anybody's opinion, which it's where you're afraid to say anything because you're worried in regards to what the repercussions are going to be. So I'm just curious. I'm a 20-year veteran, been to Iraq, so I understand what war is about. And my question is the way I see things now in regards to is that we're going in that direction, and unless something drastically changes. And there's too many people that are now going for election that are totally deniers in regards to what took place for the current president. with that, I stand on the side. And I also went to CUNY Law School. So CUNY Law School is a public interest, so our views are, I agree with the gentleman before me in regards to, but I don't think that holds very much. Just look at what recently happened in regards to declassification and classification in regards for that district judge that held up the DOJ, and it was only the appellate court, and it was still iffy if the appellate court was going to grant it, because there were some of the judges there were appointees of the prior administration. I stand to the side.
So
I just want to say real quick,
just,
Tom.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you. I'm a CUNY Law School graduate also, and I'm a veteran too. So I'm glad to see one of my CUNY Law School graduates on here.
So I will offer this, and I'll just shut up and go to the sidelines also, and to hear what my colleagues, what my colleagues think about the question, a very important one that has been raised. So there is this old saying that many of us know, that hope springs eternal. And so I'm a believer in hope springs eternal. So to the last caller's question, the 3-panel appellate court, 2 of the 3 were Republican appointees. And so to my point on hope springs eternal, it is the fact that, I might have appointed these judges, but at the end of the day, these judges are being held to a standard that asks of them to render judgment that is consistent with the law and the rule of law. And so whenever that question comes up on, is it inevitable that we're heading to some doomsday civil war, I somehow believe that at the end of the day, on the right and on the left, in the red and in the blue, that there may be differences of opinion, but the greater majority of us still believes in the United States of America, for all of its warts, for all that is good, for all that is bad. And I still believe, maybe I'm Pollyanna, maybe, I need to put on different glasses, that the driving force of a lot of this denialism, I'm going to call it that, comes from a place where there are, I hope, still a minority in the United States of America, and that the greater majority, both red and white, both Republican and Democratic, still sees America as a union and not as a separation. So I would offer that.
I gotta jump in. So many great comments and questions. And I'm going to circle back to the original question that was posed to us. I think what politics has now evolved into is, and I'm a street guy, I'm born in the Bronx. We have now understanding that people are bringing knives to a gunfight. And I think that these politicians that are extreme on both sides now see it's a win-lose type of situation. So, they'll do whatever is needed to get their points across and to drive what they believe the nation needs to go to. With that, and I was just asked, as far as a civil war, how do we even contemplate such a concept where in the previous civil war, that's how we have to reference it in this discussion, we had it as a part of it, it was geographic as well, even though there was obviously people on both sides of the geography that felt the other way. But I mean, within each of the states, there's going to be people from both sides. It literally will be neighbor killing neighbor in some fashion. How does that even come into play? But I want to take it, and I won't call it Pollyanna-ish off of what Dean Crookendale said, but I also see some hope. I think what happened in Kansas a couple of months ago with the overwhelming majority after the turnover of Roe v. Wade, saying that the people there want abortion within their state, and which totally took that red state by surprise. Maybe this isn't a crazy way, a wake-up call. And what happens is it's invigorating the voter public to now get involved and understand that every day you have to work as a US citizen. It's not just on the second Tuesday of November that you have to pay attention. And maybe this is the tipping point where we'll get back to understanding that that there is a nation that we all, right or wrong, whether we like it or not, when politicians in my lifetime, and I'm sure each one of us can say that we didn't get the person we thought should have been in office on whatever level it was, I'm still a US citizen. I'm still underneath and agree to what goes on. And I'm hoping that whatever decisions that they make on the basis of us, the people, are going to be making it for the good of the people. Democracy is a work in progress all these years. And it started off absolutely on a bad foot, as Dr. Odom was mentioning. We go back into the history and just understand how everything was just argued and the incivility that was going on. And we saw that even in a recent movie on Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, and just seeing the argument for the Emancipation Proclamation and what happens within Congress, and they're actually fighting each other. But you have to have the ability to allow your neighbor, right or wrong, from your opinion, to say what they have to say, because they have as equal right to say their thoughts as we do. And it's just having that civility to understand that.
Thank you, Mark. I know there are others on this call, and so we don't want to dominate it. So, Natalia, I don't know how you do this, but it'll be nice to hear other thoughts. That was the whole idea.
Absolutely.
Questions,
it's been a great
comments?
discussion so far. But yeah, we would love to hear from more people. Doru, please.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And thank you for choosing this topic. It's very, very interesting and also fascinating for me. I have to tell that like Vice President Crookendale's parents, I am also an immigrant in this country. I came into this country legally 39 years ago, about in February 1984. And coming from communist Romania. And it was an extraordinary, beautiful experience to be here. And in the morning, to spend 35 cents and to buy the New York Times and to read New York Times. And in the evening, to listen to McNeil Lehrer News Hour. When I started to read the New York Times in the morning, I didn't know what type of news would be. The same was true during the evening, listening to McNeil Lehrer News Hour. I have two questions, which explain this crisis in which we are today and to which you refer. Is this associated with the media or with our system of education? And why I refer to the media? Because if at that time I didn't know what type of news I will find in the New York Times, or I will listen at PBS, at present I am absolutely sure what I will hear if I am tuning in CNN, on MSNBC, or in Fox. So that this means we do not have more real news, but instruments, media that advocates one point or another, which is absolutely okay. But this means that they are not independent propagator, they are not independent in presenting the news, but they advocate one point or another. And this makes me to remember the newspaper of the Communist Party of Romania, which was called Scânteia or Spark. But below the title, below the name of Scânteia, was not written as it is in the New York Times, all the news that fit. It was written, the organ, the instrument of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Romania. So what I would like, and I hope to see again in America, is that the main outlets of news are again outlets of news, but not instruments for advocating one point of view or another point of view. This is absolutely okay, but if they consider themselves to be outlets, political outlets of the parties. And also, excuse me, another very brief remark. An essential element of democracy is the idea of compromise. In English, and I believe in American English, I don't know exactly about Britain, but the word compromise has not a negative connotation. And it is an essential element of democracy, of political understanding. Unfortunately, in other languages, it has a negative connotation. For example, in Romanian, you will say, please do not compromise me. And when you say this, you will say to a person who use a kind of bad language will have a kind of impolite behavior and something like this. That I believe that it is essential for us to think again in terms of compromise and not to vilify the opponents in order to save democracy. Thank you very, very much for this. It is very interesting.
So I would say, and Doro always raises really fascinating questions, and this whole issue of the role of media. Just let me offer this as an observation. Before I make that observation and relate it to my observation at the same time, I believe it's, I don't know, maybe tonight or tomorrow night, sometime this week, I believe CNN is going to run a series on the Murdoch media empire. And they will trace his humble beginnings of owning a couple of newspapers in Australia to then branching out into England and then to Fox and the Fox network station. And so here's what I would say on your question on the media, Doru. And this is an academic setting in which we are presenting this discussion. I think it is incumbent on all of us, regardless of where our standing is academically, intellectually, it is our incumbent responsibility as citizens to gather news from every direction and from every vantage point. And so I'm not going to blame news medias for having a particular ideological tint. I think that this is healthy, that Fox has a recognizable tint that is to the right. If it is viewed that MSNBC has an ideological view that is tilted to the left, that I think in the larger scheme of things, from an academic institution, is a healthy thing, because it in my mind's eye, it crystallizes what I would call rational debate is by hearing what the two opposite positions are. So I'm not discouraged that Fox doesn't entertain competing views on its network, and similarly, it doesn't bother me that MSNBC doesn't do the same thing. It is enough that both of them are there to help shape an understanding of what should be the politics of democracy somewhere in the middle. That is my general view.
Thank you very much. I will think of this again. Thank you
Let
very
us
much.
hear what some others think about your question about, maybe inside of one news organization, you should have divergent views and diverse views politically. Let's hear what some of our colleagues think about that.
And I just wanted to say, I don't want to put, we would love to hear from some women in the audience. I don't want to put my gender on the spot, but so far the conversation has been mostly men. And I can lead us off just with a small question.
Please, Natalia.
In relation to the media issue. I completely agree that it's the responsibility of the individual to be informed from all sides and so on. But then now there's also the problem of social media and the role social media has plays in polarizing for profit, right? And that's another level of education that we have to take on ourselves. But I would love to hear what people's thoughts on that part of it.
See, and so no men can raise their hand for the next minute. It can only be women.
Sorry.
There's silence, Natalia.
Well,
so what is my general?
People on the spot is not is autocratic.
But generally speaking, what do I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues because I know that Doru's question is an important one because I think unfairly, Doru, that the media often takes the blame for our responsibility as citizens.
No, yes, I fully agree. I fully agree with what you said. And I will think to this. Maybe also I was in my questions to some extent influenced from what I see in Europe. Because regarding American media, for example, in Romania, what is possible to watch is only CNN. So that this means many people abroad is possible to have only one point of view. And so that this means they do not have the diversity that we have here. Myself, for example, associated with your remark, I am watching all these political talk shows, and I deeply regret because sometimes they are, it is a conflict in time. Also, I am reading a lot of what is published abroad. And so, but not all people, and even in Western Europe or in Central Europe, also in Eastern Europe, have these opportunities that we have here. And
a very important point. As a kid growing up in, David is not here, so he's not going to hear me ranting about the British. I'm growing up in the British Commonwealth. The only news that you got was from Reuters. And so even there, I would make this argument, Doru, that even there, some news was better than no news, albeit that it was definitely slanted news towards a view of the West, which is not a bad thing. But I want to be able to hear positions from around the world if I want to become a much more well-rounded individual. That is my general thesis.
Exactly.
Sure, if I can.
Go ahead, Michael.
I do wholeheartedly agree with that it is healthy and important to have multiple opinions on just about every topic. And we certainly need that for democracy as well. And I do believe it's our responsibility to hear those other voices. But I guess kind of going back to what Professor Wald said much earlier, that nowadays there's a lack of statesmanship. And I think even in broader terms, there's just a lack of thinking about anything more than, quote, my own opinion or my version of things. And even, something that Natalia said struck me about the media. We tend to forget that media outlets exist to make for a profit. So, it's, any news outlet, they're more concerned with basically what is going to bring more readership or more viewers or more clicks on whatever they post on a webpage, not necessarily about what's accurate or provide a full picture. And that's part of what causes lots of problems. And again, I keep going back. I think Professor Wald said it perfectly about the lack of statesmanship. There really is just nowadays such a lack of thinking in broader terms. And also Professor Wald mentioned about what our country was like after 9/11. And I look back at that and I always talk about September 12th, how, for all the pain and all the devastation that there was, on September 12th, we in a lot of ways woke up as a better people. And I'm in some ways just incredibly saddened by how far we've fallen since September 12th.
So, Natalia, I don't want to take away your authority, but my clock says it's 12:56, and so we are coming close to the end of which is a really wonderful discussion that I'm hoping that we'll be able to broaden into a much more detailed discussion in a larger college community, because what Michael has just said, and lamenting where we are as a country, whatever it is that you see that cause you lament is not going to go away anytime soon. And I think that this question about are we heading towards a civil war is not just a theoretical intellectual debate, but indeed a reflection of where we are as a country, deeply polarized on the right and on the left. But I want to end my part of this presentation again, echoing this notion of hope springing eternal. One of the things that struck me, having, as I said, come as an immigrant, and not all that I had, and my legal papers was a green card, even though it didn't look anything green, but that's what it was called, a green card. And so one of the things that has always stayed with me, I have some relatives that live in Montreal, and I went to visit them. And on my return to the United States at the border, immigration officials was there to meet all of us, and I'll never recall the question of the immigration officer was, "Can you state your I don't remember what the question was, your nationality?" And I said, "I'm a United States citizen." And he said, "Welcome back, sir. Welcome back." And I'm sure that this happens at many points of entries into the United States of America, where the question is not, who are you? Are you a red American or you are a blue American? The simple question is, are you an American citizen? And that gives me hope that notwithstanding the difficult fissures that now exist in our country, that who are we? We are Americans will rise to the top. So that is my way of ending my part of this presentation.
Thank you so much, Vice President Crookendale. And thank you to everyone who came and participated. This was a wonderful discussion. And as the Vice President said, we hope to, the library and student services and all of us have been charged with having more of these talks, and we hope to be doing that. Sometime in October, we're going to be inviting representatives from the Racial Justice Commission to discuss the ballot proposals that are going to be there for the November election. So stay tuned for that. And just thank you so much. It was so wonderful to hear everyone engaging.
Thank you so much, Natalia,
Thank you.
for putting the event on.
Absolutely. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all. That was a good conversation. Have a good afternoon and a good weekend, everyone. Professor Odom, before we go, I sent you something in the chat. I can't hear you.
I'm back. I got back.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yeah, just mention a book I read earlier that I think you might, if you haven't read or know far more about it. Race Against Time by Jerry Mitchell.
Got it. We'll get it and we'll read it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
But I have a question for you, my CUNY student, my CUNY thing. Have you read People's History by Zing?
Professor Odom left the meeting.
Oh, okay. Thanks. This is Professor Lamboy. Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
thank you.
No problem. Have a great evening.
Have a
You
good
too.
one. Thank you for hosting this, Natalia.
Thank you,
Great
Mike.
job. Okay, have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
No, you were going to say something?
No, I was just embarrassed that the name on Humphrey's screen was not his name.
That's
I
we
don't know.
all, yeah, we all know Humphrey, so he's okay
Yeah.
with that.
This is true. This is true.
He gets lots of latitude. Have a good weekend,
Okay.
Natalia.
Thank you. You
You're
too.
welcome. Bye.